This is a walkthrough of the project called Stylize Your Website. If you're British, you will use an S here in the spelling. But the point of this project is to add some CSS to your website and start making it look the way you want it to. So you've got a couple of pages from the last project that you're linking around to each other. As you go from one to the next, you should have a consistent navigation bar. But we want to have a better look because this is not a good design so far. It's too simple. We need to style it up. So this this project gives you a little CSS cheat sheet. This is just for total beginners. It's just a little bit of an introduction to a couple of CSS properties you can use. So it reminds you of the syntax, and then it reminds you that if you want to target a certain element, you can use the element name to target it. It'll get all of the P elements. And then similarly, if you want to create a special class, you can do that using the class, and then target it using the class name, and then you put a dot in front of it. So this will target anything that has class equals my class. So this is the list of properties that are just quick little helpful things, and I'll let you go through this, and I'll update this as the course goes on. I'll hopefully improve it. But you can use that to kind of like get ideas for what you want to change. And this first step is also saying that you need to put all of the CSS that you add in here. So this is my document, index.html. All of your CSS should go in here, in this style, closed style, in between these two, in the head, which the head is right here. So already it's getting a little messy because we've got a lot going on here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start indenting. So I'm going to highlight everything that's in the head and indent it, and then I'm going to highlight everything that's in the body and indent it by hitting tab. And then I'm going to, within this style, I'm going to indent again. And let me show you the way that a lot of people will format their CSS. So this is okay for a fairly simple CSS because you just have one or two properties within each rule. But you can have as many properties as you want, as many as will fit. So it makes sense to do this. You have your selector, and then you have like the opening and closing brackets, and then you indent all the properties. And I'm going to always close with one of these semicolons. So I'm going to go ahead and format all of these to look the same. And this may make it a little bit simpler for you to scroll through. And actually, because of the way this is, I'm going to unindent this just to kind of like make it look more lined up. It's kind of a judgment call. I kind of think this is maybe clearer. Okay, so now I am on my way to getting the first step done. So this is totally just a judgment call. So you can stylize this any way that you want to. So I'm going to save it and refresh. You'll see that nothing really changes. So I'm going to go ahead and look at this cheat sheet and get some ideas. So first of all, I've got color, background, and text color. So I don't really like this to be green. So I'm going to change the color of just this H1. And I gave it this class equals top. So I'm going to go here. And I'm going to just make this black again. And by removing it, it'll go to the default, which happens to be black. Now I think I'm going to make sure that this doesn't have so much padding and margin. It's got too much by my estimation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on this and go to inspect to get my browser inspect tool. And as I hover over this, I can see it's got tons of margin there, either margin or padding, but this should tell me. If I scroll down here, I can kind of see this is the user agent style sheet. This is the CSS that's the default CSS, and it's targeting all H1s. So it's got this stuff, and I see margin before, margin after. So this is special. This is a special CSS. Whenever you see something that starts with a dash like this, and it'll usually say something like WebKit, MS for Microsoft, P for Presto, MOZ for Mozilla. That's the rendering engine. So this is specific to the rendering engine. So you can't usually use these because they're kind of like special browser code, but it does tell me that it looks like this is margin. So I'm going to go up and test real quick. On this just automatically, since I've clicked here, this will automatically apply whatever style I put into it. So I'm going to say margin tab 0, and now I can see what it looks like without a margin, and that is a little bit more what I wanted it to look like. So I'm going to go ahead and give actually I'm going to give the top one a margin of 0, and this is special. Note I didn't put px, 0px. Because it's 0, you don't need units. In every other case, you do need units. So, but 0 pixels is the same as 0 EMs or 0 0.0 anything is always 0. So that's the only reason I didn't put a unit. But usually you'll put your unit there, and pixels is a great unit to use. So now I just saved that and refreshed, and I lost the little change that I made here, but it added the change that I made in the code over here. So now it looks a little better. Okay, now I also want to, I want this not to be so like pushed up on the edge here. So in my cheat sheet, you see I've got box model information. I'm going to use padding, and this is an interesting trick. I can actually put padding directly on the body. See, if I hover here, I see the whole document body element. And again, the user agent style sheet gives it a default margin of 8 pixels. So actually, maybe I'll use margin to match what it has. I'm going to create an element that's just going to give padding to the entire body element, which will give padding to everything and push this in, so it won't be like jammed up against the edge there. So I'm going to say margin 20 pixels. Now, what do I want this to apply to? I can't just leave this here. This isn't part of a rule. It's just free floating. So I have to put it within the opening and closing brackets, and then right here, what goes here? It's called the selector. It's what you put here is what you want this to target, what you want it to select, and what I want it to select is the body element. So I can use this word body because that's the same word here, body. So save and refresh to check. Now you see it's done that. Now I actually don't want it to come down. You see that it kind of like, it gave it a top margin and a left and a right and a bottom margin. If we scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll see it has a bottom margin too. So how do we apply just a top margin? This is special way to set this is you can say margin dash top, and then you can say that for all the other ones too. So I copy that, paste, 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 top, right, bottom, left. Now why did I do it in this order, top, right, bottom, left? Can you make sense of this? The reason is because I went like a clock. So if the hour hand on a clock is up at noon, it's at top, and then the next place it'll go is towards the right, and then it'll go down to the bottom, and then it'll go to the left, and then it'll go back up to the top again at noon. So this is rotating like the hands on a clock, and this is important because this is the way that CSS always works. I'll show you that. I'll show you what I mean in a second, but I'm going to save this. Actually, I'm going to delete that margin top to 0 pixels. So now there's a right, bottom, and left margin, but no top margin, and I've saved it. So when I refresh, you see it pops up, but the left margin stays. Okay. Now say I want to actually, I don't want it to be 20 pixels, that's too small. I want it to be a lot more. But I also want it to be flexible on different devices. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this to be a percent. I'm going to change the unit just of the left and right because I don't want a huge margin on the bottom. So now that I've given it a percent, it'll be more flexible when I'm with different page sizes. So with very, very large page sizes, I'll still have like a good percent of my viewable screen as a margin. Whereas if I just use pixels, if I made this just humongously large, the pixel width wouldn't be very much. So that's why I chose percent. But you can see it gives me a nice big margin here. So I like that. Now here's the trick. This is like the specific top, right, bottom, left. But you saw before how I just used this property, margin, and I put a 0. So what this is this is shorthand for all of these. What this means is make the margin top, right, bottom, and left all to be 0. So there's also a shorthand for if you want to set all of them differently. So this is if you want them all to be the same. To make them different, you can do this. 20px, or actually I'm going to do percent. So what you're going to do is you're going to put all 4 values for top, right, bottom, and left. That's all 4. So you have top, right, bottom, left, like a clock, clockwise. Starting at the top at noon. Top is 0, so that matches this. Right is 20%, that matches this. Bottom is 20 pixels, that matches this. And then left is 20%, and that matches this. So this brings up another issue. When you have redundant properties. So this sets the margins, and this sets the margins. So what do you think happens when the browser is going through this? It reads this and sets the margins, and then it reads these. What do you think it does? So it won't do anything really because they're the exact same. But say I had different values. So something like 60, 90, 60. These are crazy values to kind of like make it obvious. So this is setting the left and right pixel margins to 20%. This is setting the left and right to 60%. So what's going to happen? Is it going to be 20 or 60? So you can see it's 60, and because it's added up to more than 100, it's kind of messed it up too. But the browser reads from top to bottom just like we do. So what happens is it'll set this, and then it'll override it with this. So the lower one within a rule will win. So we need to delete this if we want the shortcutted one to apply. So I saved that, and now if I refresh, it looks the way we want again. So another thing I want to do is make this look a little better. So I don't want these to have the underline. And in here you can see that I gave you a little section on fonts and text. And here I have text decoration none. Text has no formatting, including no underlining, versus text decoration underline. So because these anchor tags have a underline by default, you can see in the user agent style sheet here, text decoration is underlined by default. So I can go ahead and unset that. And again, I'm going to write text decoration none, copying from that cheat sheet there. And this has to be as a part of a rule. It can't be freestanding. So right here I'm going to put the selector. Now as you're watching this, can you figure out what selector I would use to target just these anchors? A is the name of the element that I'm targeting. So now if I save and refresh over here, the underlines disappeared. So these look cool, but say I want to give it a different kind of a different feel now. So I'm gonna in my cheat sheet here, I've got a couple of options: font size, font weight, font family. So I'm gonna right now it's looks like it's a serif. Serifs are these little like edges on the font, the little like see on the bottom of the N there, it kind of like flares out, and the bottom and the top of the B, this little line that comes out, that's a serif. So sans serif is Latin for without serif. So sans serif is like the more smooth font without those little edges that stick out there. So I'm going to give my anchor a sans serif font. So font style sans serif. Save. Whoops, what did I do wrong? think I typed the wrong property name. So let me check again. Font family, and what did I put? Font style. So made a mistake. So when you guess and check like this, well, you shouldn't be guessing. You should be trying to write code that you're not guessing. But when you check frequently, then you'll catch mistakes. Like, I expected it to change and it didn't change, so I knew I typed something wrong. So now this is distinct from the rest of the page. It looks a little bit different, this sans serif font. You see those little edges disappeared. And they're purple because I've clicked on them. So I'm going to leave them like that. Maybe I'm going to actually also give them a font weight of bold. And note, I'm always ending each little property with this semicolon. And also note that I'm never using equal signs in here in the CSS. CSS doesn't use equal signs. Save, refresh. Okay, that's looking good. Now, here's something I want to point out right now that is maybe getting ahead of ourselves. But the way I've written this rule, this will target all anchors, all links in the entire page. And as I'm writing it right now, I'm only thinking about these. So what can you do to make sure that it only targets these links, the navigation links, and not all links on the entire page? So you have to be very aware of when you're writing your selector. Right now, this only applies to the ones I want it to target. But in the future, if I ever write another tag that has this A element, meaning if I ever write another link, it's going to have this CSS applied to it. So this is actually poorly written right now, since I intended it only to be for these anchors that are inside this nav. In fact, we can make that a little bit more clear by indenting this out like that, and then putting this down. So you can see I'm only wanting to target these that are inside this nav, not all the other ones. So what can we do to make this selector target just these? Well, from what I've taught you so far, you know that you can do this. Class equals nav link. You can copy this attribute and give each one of these a class equals nav link and paste it in here. And then what we would do is, instead of this, we would do dot, because it's a class, nav link. And that would work. This would target only these. But this would be kind of repetitive because you have to put this class in each one. So I'm going to show you a little trick here that, don't worry about it, we'll go over it again, but just to introduce you to the idea, you can actually tell it, I only want anchors that are inside of a nav element. So how do you think we would do that? So if we just wrote nav here, then this CSS would apply to the nav element, not to the anchor elements. And that actually will do something kind of cool. I haven't told you what CSS stands for yet. It stands for cascading style sheets. So you understand that it has to do with style. But cascade means that it flows down. So if I target this to the nav element, then it'll apply text decoration, font family, and font weight to the nav, and that'll actually cascade down into here, although there's complications. So I refreshed, and you see that some of the styles did cascade down. I'm not targeting the anchors directly anymore. I'm targeting them through this, and then what they're doing is they're inheriting it. These are a child of this parent, and so they inherit the CSS that the parent gets. But look at this. It got bold, it got the sans serif, but the text decoration none, it didn't inherit it, even though I set that. So if you want to know why, let's look into the DOM inspector and take a look at what's actually going on. So if I click on the nav element, I can see the rule I wrote right here, text decoration, font family, font weight. Now if I click on the anchor, it'll actually show me what it's inheriting. So these are the rules that are like, here and here are the rules that are actually applied directly to the anchor. So this is nothing, and then this is the browser default. Now down here, this is what it's inherited. So what it's inherited from the nav is the sans serif and the bold. Now look, the text decoration underline is not here. It didn't inherit that. Sorry, text decoration none. Now, just looking at this, can you tell why it didn't inherit it? It has to do with the browser default for links. The browser default for links is right here, and it's given it a text decoration underline. So this actually overwrote the text decoration none that it inherited from the nav. So this is some very complicated CSS inheritance rules going on. And so you may wonder, like, how do you ever keep track of all this, and how do you know that this is gonna win over this? So some of that just comes with practice and experience. But another part of it is that this right here, you can see there's like this crazy thing after it. It actually, you can build more complicated selectors than I've told you about so far. So this is like the basic part of the selector, and then this is like a plus. This is an additional part. And it's called specificity, and we'll get into it later. But generally, the more like complicated and rich a selector is, the higher priority it has. So this is just targeting an HTML element, and this is targeting an HTML element plus it's doing something else. So because this is like plus on this, this is just one thing, this is just doing one thing, this is doing one thing and another thing. Because it's doing more things, this is gonna win in terms of this text decoration which they share. And so that's why this one wins out. So what we need to do is we actually need to target it in a way that we win this little game of specificity. But the best way and the simplest way right now would be to go into a more specific way of targeting this anchor element. And what we're going to do is we're going to say, so this targets the nav, but here's the thing, we're going to do two things. So remember how this one was doing two things? It's doing targeting the element and it's doing some other crazy thing here. Don't worry about exactly what. We're going to do two things as well. So we're going to target the nav element, and then we're going to target the anchor element too. So this doesn't just mean target the nav and target the anchor. This is a special syntax, the space, which means target the nav, and the space means target whatever comes after that's inside the nav. So this only will target anchors that are inside the nav. This won't target all anchors, and it won't target like both anchors and navs. This only targets anchors. So another way to do this is you read it from right to left, starting with this curly brace. We normally read left to right like this, but when you're reading the selector, you can read right to left and start with this anchor. So what it's targeting is an anchor. The last thing here is what it's targeting. It's targeting an anchor tag, and then the space means it's only targeting anchor tags that are inside of a nav. So now what this does is it's doing two things. Find a nav and then find an anchor inside of it and target just those. So it won't target other anchors in the page. So that's what we want. Save. And now we're targeting the anchor directly, so it's not inheriting anymore. And we have two things going on, so it's more complicated. So when we refresh, you see the underlines disappeared, and now this little rule that we wrote moved up. It used to be underneath the default user agent style. It moved up because it's more important now, because we're targeting the anchor directly. It's not inheriting it anymore. And now you see that it wins this rule, text decoration none. And here the text decoration, see, it's struck out. It's crossed out because it is not as specific. It's because it didn't win the game of the cascade. So that was a long tangent, but we're learning things here. So I'm going to let you go ahead and continue styling on your own, but I just wanted to give you those little tips for this walkthrough. We will continue to look into that in future classes, future lessons. But the next step that it gives you is go ahead and move on to step 2. Move your CSS into an external style sheet. So first, get all of your CSS from within the style element and copy it into a new file. So this is the style element right here. And I want to get all of the CSS, but not this is actually HTML. So you notice that HTML always has these tags. CSS doesn't actually have the tags. So this is the CSS here, not the tags, even though it is the style attribute. So I'm going to cut that, and then I'm going to create a new file. And the way to do that is here, and I can just click CSS because I'm in Shift Edit. And this is a bit weird, so I'm going to delete that. You don't need to worry about that now. And now I'm pasting. So whoops, I'm going to highlight all of this and do Shift Tab to straighten it out. Okay, so now all my CSS is in here, and I'm going to save it with a specific name, save as, and make sure I'm saving it in public_HTML, and I'm going to call it styles.css. Now this is super important, has to be .css, okay? Not .html, this is not HTML. Now go back in here, we don't need this anymore, it's empty, so delete that. Save. So what's going to happen when we refresh? It's going to break. So all of our CSS is lost now because we copied it into this file and then we didn't tell the browser where that file is, and we didn't tell it to use it. So let's go back to our instructions. So step 2, save it to a new file on your Skillshare folder. This would be if you were doing it on your desktop and wanted to upload it. Since you're doing code and upload simultaneously with Shift Edit, you're going to actually save it in your public_HTML. So it's saying save as .css, which we already did. Now in the original file, we need to include the CSS file, and it gives us this code. So I'm going to copy this. Copy. I'm going to go over here, and right in the place where the other one was, in the head element, I'm going to put this link, and you see I put filename.css. So we're going to change this to the actual file name we gave this CSS file, and I called it styles. So now it says styles.css. Now if I save this and go to my page and refresh, all the styles came back. Cool. And by the way, they both have to be in the same folder. So this URL here, this link is relative, which means it's assuming that this index.html is in this, whatever this is linking to is in the same folder as this index.html. And if we look in the directory here, you can see that that actually is true. I have the index.html, and then the styles.css is down here. So so that is correct. And if this was in a weird place, a better way to do this maybe would be to do this /. So now no matter where this file is, no matter where this code is located, it'll always get the styles.css that's in the root directory. So I'm going to do that. So one thing that we are wanting to do is build a consistent look across our page. But now if I click on these don't have that consistent look anymore. They're different. Only the CSS is only applied to this one. So what am I going to do? Am I going to rewrite the code on all of my other pages? No. I'm going to simply copy this one line that links or includes the styles.css, and then I'm going to tell all these other pages to look at that same style.css. So I'm going to go ahead and open About Me, and in the head right here, I'm going to paste that. I'm just going to paste, I copied it from the index, paste it, save it, and then I'm going to do the same thing with hello.html. I double click here, in the head, hit enter, paste, save. So now everything is saved. And if I go here and refresh, go to my first page. Now if I refresh this, it pops over. It's got the CSS. About Me, refresh. Cool. So now I've got a consistent look going on in my page. Now what's different about the home page and this page? The home page has this big text and these don't. Why is that? It's because in the home page I have this h1 class equals top, but on About Me it's just h1 without that class. So this is another thing I want to do to make sure they're consistent. I'm going to copy this class. I'm going to give this h1 that same class name, and note when I copied it I included the space so I didn't have to type it. Save. So if you clearly, if you didn't have a space here, it would think that the name of the element was h1 class, and that's not an HTML tag. So I'm gonna go to this one, my first HTML, and paste, and now I'm saving this. So now when I refresh this, this should match in style because it copied that style. And then go to my first page. It's already got the change. So now they all look very similar in style. This one has a subheader here. Now I can go in and I can change the CSS to this now with what I've learned. I may decide, oh, this is like all messed up. This needs to not have the margins. I can go ahead and fix that up, but I'll let you do that. So if the CSS disappeared after you included it, then it probably wasn't included properly. So you can go to Skillshare and ask a question, but most likely you have got the hyperreference wrong. It should look just like this, and then you need to make sure that your styles, that the name here points to the CSS file, the same name, and obviously it has to have .css. The name has to be a CSS extension, and then this part here means look for it in the root directory, which is the same as public_HTML. So right now I have this in styles.css, but I may want to create a new directory and call it styles. This won't let me scroll down far enough to see it actually. There it is. So now I've created this folder called styles, and if I move this into it, I just dragged it in there. It's kind of like hiding on the bottom of my screen. So you can see styles.css. Now this is going to break because I'm telling it to look for styles.css in the root directory, but it's no longer in the root directory. It's in public_HTML styles.css. So if I refresh, you'll see it breaks. So to correct this, can you tell me how I would correct this? I need to write, so root directory styles / So now this is saying look in the root directory, find a folder named styles, and the / indicates like a folder, and then find styles.css. Whoops, I just dragged that over there. So now if I save this and refresh, it's fixed again. And of course, because I made a change to where it's located, I have to update all of these other ones as well. I have to update the link on all of them because they have an outdated link. So this is a very dry, don't repeat yourself, DRY setup now, because I can reuse the same CSS. And actually the browser will download the CSS once, and it won't have to download it every single time you click on one of these. Here's a trick. If you click on resources, you can see a lot of resources here. Most of this is empty, but if you go in here, you can see the style sheets. Here's the style sheet. And it's actually just using this file once. It won't download it again. So the first time you download, the very first time you come to this page, you'll download the index.html, this image, and then the style sheet. But when you click here, it'll download hello.html, and it already has the CSS. It's the same file, so it won't make that second download. So it's actually faster to load this second page because it doesn't have to download the CSS as well.